As our Black History Month panel series continues, Brandon Pope, he sat down with a diverse panel to have some real talk about interracial relationships. Take a look.
We're going to have some real conversation about culture in general and how Black history fuses into it. Is it becoming more culturally acceptable for people to date outside of their race here in 2019?
I would say yes. And actually, Dr. Cheryl Judice from Northwestern, who's a professor, has written an entire book about encouraging Black women to date outside of their race. But I think that also when you look at the trajectory of our country and the demographics, in 2050, we will not be looking the same as we do now. Just as in 2019, we don't look the same as 1919. So I think it's far more acceptable now.
Well, I mean, where I grew up in Chicago was one of the few places where it was not only culturally acceptable, it was culturally predominant in Uptown. I mean, me, Jacinda, and everybody we grew up with actually dated and married outside their race. So my experience is probably not what's usual, but clearly if you look at what's going on throughout the country, it's more acceptable than it was when we were growing up.
When you're thinking about different cultures, especially in the Black culture, as a Black woman, you're supposed to, or what you're taught is to uplift a Black man. Mm-hmm. So I feel like stepping out of that, picture and that mindset, not to say that we shouldn't uplift our Black men, but to step out of that mindset, there's more to it. And then if you're thinking on the other end of things, there's LGBTQ qualities that apply to this as well. So, I mean, it's all about expanding, and at the end of the day, it's gonna change. Time is changing and people are changing, so I feel like it's very fluent.
I think it's maybe culturally acceptable. However, I think about it with caution, because what I do see is that, or what I do believe is that we cannot forget the historical implications, and that we have to always be critical of relationships and commitments. Because I do feel like you can be in an interracial relationship but not necessarily be for Black liberation, right? So I think that they don't go hand in hand. And so I think being in an interracial relationship is a political statement in many ways, and that just because you are in an interracial relationship does not suggest or validate that you are, a civil rights, you believe in civil rights, or that. And so that's my concern.
I think the question comes up, if you marry outside of your race, will this person understand the issues that your Black son will deal with eventually when he gets older and has to interact with police officers and the question of Black liberation? So I think that that's ultimately what gives people pause, but I do think that it's far more prevalent now. My sister will be marrying an Italian man next year, so it's definitely prevalent and it's happening. People are attracted to who they are attracted to, and I think, once again, I think you brought up a great point when you said Chicago is, we know we have our issues here in Chicago as well, but it's far more progressive in certain aspects than other parts of the country. So the lens that we look through, it's not abnormal to see interracial couples, but I mean, it's human nature to fall in love with someone who you're attracted to.
I mean, not to get too philosophical about it, but race is a social construct that's constantly evolving and changing, right? So I'm Jewish, I'm white now. 30 years ago, my people weren't, right? Right. And so, I bring that as the foundation to say, as Keena said, people are attracted to who they're attracted to, but that's always evolving in terms of what is even an interracial relationship is evolving. It's different now than it is then, because people just do what they want to do and what they feel like doing, and then the society has to create the construct for what they're doing. And so that's just going to be a constant evolution.
Rap music today, it's common. You're gonna hear the N-word. And as rap music has become the most popular and dominant cultural music out there, is it ever okay to use the N-word if you're not in the Black community, since it is popular culture with rap music?
No.
Yeah, that's a hard no.
The N-word has changed over time. The way that we use it in media and the way that we use it with our homie, our friend, is to stand as a homie or a friend when it's being used. But if a non-Black person came up to me and was like singing the songs to the word, I just feel like you shouldn't use that. You know where it comes from. Even if we have changed the meaning for it, it still should not be used.
The fact that that people complain that they can't use a word when they have all the other privileges and powers that created the derogatory nature of that word makes no sense to me.
Everybody wants to be black until it's time to be black.
Woo!
When we're talking about the nuances of the erratic political and social atmosphere that we're in, you can, and I know we'll delve into that, you can use these words that are colloquialisms in the black community. You can eat our food, you can do all of that. But when it's time to stand up and say that we stand against the discardment, the abuse, the mutilation of the black body, state-sanctioned violence against black folks, they're nowhere to be found. These same people who are at Kendrick Lamar's concert, words have power. We've seen words bring nations up and then tear nations down, right? And so I prefer not to use the word.
Black culture, you can make the argument, has become pop culture. Everything cool, everything that seems awesome nowadays derives from black culture, it seems. Is it okay for people who are not black to celebrate black culture, be a part of black culture, and really do things involved with black culture?
The fact that the dominant pop culture brings in a lot of black culture and a lot of Latino culture, actually, and some Asian culture, I think that's a good thing. We want that. That's a different question, I think, than appropriating it for economic or oppressive means. And I don't know how you separate that out.
I think I can teach people about my culture. You can see how we do things, but unfortunately, when people do appropriate, it is for financial gain. And so when you think of, and why is that a problem? Because when you think of the fact that the generational wealth is not increasing in Black America, that generationally, we are not wealthy, but you see the Kardashians, and they're gonna have several grandchildren on the Forbes list, as Beyonce put it. That's a problem for me. The economics of it, when we talk about gun violence, it's because we don't have an economy in the Black community to help provide jobs. When we talk about education and elevating ourselves out of education, it's because we can't pay for quality education, right? And so it's an economic issue for me.
I feel like we gotta work 10 times harder to do what white people are copying, or not Caucasian people who aren't black. It's very disrespectful, because how are you to say that you learned this and this is something that you saw, and now it's a part of your culture, but how is it a part of your culture if you took it away from us to begin with? And for you to come and take something and look at it and be like, oh, that's trendy, that's something that I want to do, that you're not knowing what that culture is, you're not seeing, you don't know the information from where it has started into what it is now.
It's very easy for non-Black folks to not feel responsible and to dip in and out, right? What is a culture vulture, right? It's like you scoop in and get what you need, and then you keep it moving. And we see that happening. And so I think for me, it's about a responsibility and a commitment to these relationships. And it's not about it's how you enter, exist, and exit in a community. And I think when we're talking about existing and coexisting in a community, it's about that, right? It's about leveraging those resources, but it's also about having honor and respect. And we're talking about celebrating for the long term. And for me, that really is about understanding Black liberation comes first. And so, I'm saying that again just because it's not on the surface. It's for the long haul.
Obviously, I mean, this is a great discussion we just had here. Pop culture, Black culture is a big part of that. It's part of Black history, and that's American history.
Well said.
So they talked about, first, starting with the N word. I think it's safe to say that nobody really should be using that word, and we should work. I know it's a part of culture and music and all that stuff. We should probably work to eradicate that. And obviously another conversation, but certainly an important conversation also about just appropriation. What's good,
What's honoring?
what's right.
What's appropriation?
Yeah.
Like, it can be a fine line. Yeah. It's good to be asking the questions, even if we don't always know the answers. I feel like it's good to ask questions and actually be thinking about it.
Get the dialogue going, which
Yeah.
is what all of these are about.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to be airing these clips all month long, so be sure you tune in to see what we're talking about next.